well, jumping into it, so what's your first memory of being around racing?
My dad was a racer, so Sunday mornings sometimes we weren't allowed to go to the races. My mom used to say it was kids' night or it wasn't kids' night. I think that was, if she had a babysitter, it wasn't kids' night and we would stay home. But when it was kids' night, we would go to Danbury and wait. And I still have a thing on the wall here of that's what the sign was on the ticket booth. And there was probably 15 ticket booths, and we lined up in the ticket booths. And when we bought the tickets, we would run to the seats. Even though everybody sat in the same place, we would run to it. Mm-hmm. And watching races, watching my dad, who's a Hall of Famer, who's most feature wins up in Danbury, and it was a place where the fast car started in the back. So there was always action. And if it didn't close, I'm not sure I still wouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, it closed, and it was terrible that it was closed because it was a great place, great track, great people. It drew from different areas, and it was quite a success story. But after it was sold, we had to go find other things to do, and away we went.
So growing up, was there ever any thoughts of doing something outside of racing, or you were like, no, I want a career in this?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up, my parents own a junkyard, and it does okay, and that wasn't bad because you see all different kinds of people come through the junkyards, and it's still very busy today at times. I didn't really pursue racing. When I was 14, I had an older brother, Ronnie, that was killed in a car wreck, and he was pretty much the racer. I mean, he built his own go-karts. I think he built his first go-kart at age 12, and he built his own street cars and this and that. And he would have been the racer in the family. And you had to be 18 to start at Danbury. So when he passed, I was 14. Got hooked up with all of his friends. Just took me under their wing, and when I was 18, my dad gave me a car that he had repossessed. He got it from somebody at a repossessed sale, and he said, "Here you go. You want it? There it is." And that started it.
It's awesome. So like you keep mentioning Danbury a lot, and the Lajoie name is just so synonymous with the Danbury race arena. Can you tell us a little bit about what made that speedway so special?
Well, number one, it was a closed club, which means you knew who you were racing. The club voted you in and voted you out. They didn't want no traveling people coming in there. They didn't want no professional people coming in there. If you had a car and you met the criteria, I mean, I think they had 45, 50 people a night for cars, so they always had plenty of cars. But what they also had was the different areas they pulled from. It was situated close to the New York line, so you pulled from, in a 50-mile radius around. You had Norwalk guys, you had Danbury guys, you had Ridgefield guys, you had Pauling, New York guys, Katona, New York. So each driver brought 25 fans in. So it had a weekly head count of 6,000 to 8,000 people, and the club raced, and they got 40% of the gate. And so my dad would win a 25 lap race and come out of here with $5,000.
Wow.
I don't see that today at a feature event. The big races, they had, I think, 4 big races a year. They pay close to $10,000 to win. So there's not many places that do that today. So it was quite unique, just because of the towns that were involved. around the speedway, and it was a racetrack you could go as fast on the outside as you could on the inside, and that made it fun because it wasn't a one-lane track.
During your racing career, you found a lot of success. Is there a particular moment that stands out to you as just your favorite like memory being around the racetrack?
You know, there's been so many. IROC victory. I was the first Busch guy to win an IROC race. I might be the only Busch guy to win an IROC race. And that was fun. I mean, I learned a lot in the IROC series just from going there and testing, and the champions that were there, from Jimmy Vassiter, Montoya to Zanardi. You know, I mean, all of these different walks of racing that we raced against, and got them in my phone. It's cool. It was really cool. And then the winter race, and we were racing Busch cars in Pikes Peak, and Tony Stewart was running Busch cars, and he had won the IndyCar championship the year before. It was his first year in the Busch cars, and we flew from Pikes Peak to Michigan together. And then, you know, I outrun him, and it was cool to fly back with a trophy. And we started, okay, you know, Tony Stewart, he was 10 years younger than I am, so he was a kid coming up. And here he is, we're flying on his plane, and I got the trophy, and that was pretty cool.
Today you're making an impact through your racing seat company, the Lajoie Seating. How did that idea come to be?
Well, this is a seat, the seat that I use, my dad purchased in 1971 from Mark Donahue. Mark Donahue was a Penske driver. He was one of the first engineering drivers, I think, that was engineered, used a lot of engineering to make him go fast. And we were at a trade show. I remember it was right before my brother got killed, that we went to this trade show in Hartford, Connecticut, and Mark's Trans Am car was sitting there. My dad said, "Man, that looks like a comfortable seat." And Mark said, "Sit in it." And my dad sat in it, and he's like, "Wow, this is nice." And he said, "Oh, hell, I'll sell you one." He said, "I built them for myself." So my dad bought one, and it was too big to fit into his modified. So he just kept cutting it down to make it fit. And once he made it fit, okay, this is what I'm going to use. My dad and Dick Moroso were friends. And Dick had a guy building fiberglass hoods for old Corvettes out of Moroso's, and my dad hooked him up. Moroso hooked my dad up with him to build these seats. And Dick didn't want nothing to do with it. He goes, you just buy them from that guy. So he had a guy making them. So when I started, he said, use this seat. And I did. It's one I crashed real bad with at Daytona. I had to sign a release before I ran Daytona. NASCAR didn't. They never seen a seat like that. Even though I had a steel cage around it, they were skeptical about the fiberglass. And then 1994, right when I was putting this building up, NASCAR come in here and said, "Hey, we're not going to let you use fiberglass anymore, and you need to do something different." So I took that seat to a couple builders that were around town here, and neither one of them would do it because they said it's too much work. We can't make something out of a flat piece of aluminum. We can't make it round. We'll just build you a square seat. And one of the guys did, Steve Richardson, he tried. We worked long hours trying to get it to where he says, "Randy, this is just way too much work." Finally met a guy that can do English wheel work, and English wheel forms metal, and he would form the metal, and we had a couple seats. If I had to guess, there were 15 or 20 pieces because of the shapes and how curved it was, and which worked, but it wasn't time sensitive because it took a long time. And I finally met somebody through somebody that can do stampings. And once we did the stampings, I said, well, my first quote I got was close to $250,000 to get the dies and to do everything like that. And I just old Busch driver, and I was like, yeah, okay, we're not going to do that. Luckily, this gentleman in Ohio does some different stuff. He's a pattern shop. They make big stuff for gas valves and stuff like that. So, and he was a piddler. He raced Porsches, had the same style seat as that Mark Donahue seat, and him and his buddies had just did the Richard Petty driving school at Kentucky, and he's like, he couldn't believe that him and his buddies were all bruised up from the NASCAR style seats. They were black and blue and they weren't comfortable, and he's like, man, my old fiberglass seat's a whole lot more comfortable. So he knew that the market was there for a better seat because he already used one. And he said, okay, and thankfully he's a race fan, and that was 30 years ago now because we've been in business 30 years. And he is my lifeline in Ohio that does the stampings, that does the casting work. We have some cast parts, and he does that. And so we've been partners ever since, and I'm still making payments, so we're still here.
Now, during your career, you yourself had a lot of awesome paint schemes from the Bob Evans days, the Dollar General days. Is there either a paint scheme of yours that was your favorite, or a paint scheme just in general that you're like, that right there is the best paint scheme in NASCAR?
I guess my dad had a candy apple red and white car. Pretty. It was pretty. And it stood out on the racetrack. It almost glowed in the dark, and you could see it on the racetrack. That's one of my biggest things is you be able to pick it up out of the race, sitting on the racetrack. Because if you can't figure out who the hell you're watching, what the hell good was it? So I particularly to the red and white my dad cars had. The Wood Brothers 21 car with David Pearson, that candy apple red and white car. Oh my gosh, that was pretty. That was pretty. Well, my favorite cars are the Blue Fina car we won the championships in. You could see it had the emblem on the hood, had the big shield on the hood. My NASCAR North car, blue and white, had an emblem on the hood. And people said you could see the cars. You could pick yourself out. It helps when you run good too. But a car that you can pick out, people can see. It kind of goes hand in hand. If it runs good, that's even better. But usually the ones that, like I said, the Blue Fina cars, they're kind of special because they brought me to the championships.